Dear friends, a warm welcome from the European Movement offices here in Brussels. We are excited to have you with us for a discussion on something that is remarkably current at the moment. The Conference on the Future of Europe is about to start. The European institutions are agreeing this week the joint declaration that will set the foundations for the conference, and it will describe how it will operate. And to discuss exactly what this joint declaration includes, but also what are the objectives and ambitions of the Conference on the Future of Europe, we have assembled a great panel of leading MEPs on the subject. So today with me, I have DANUTA HÜBNER, member of the European Parliament for the European People's Party. Also joining me, DOMENEC DEVESA, who is a member of the European Parliament for the Socialist and Democrat Group. And of course, Daniel Freund, a member of the European Parliament for the European Green Party. Thank you all very much for taking the time. I know how busy your agenda is this week, and not least because of everything taking place around the Conference of the Future of Europe. Our timing couldn't have been better. So considering the joint declaration is being served as we speak, perhaps I can ask you to spend a couple of minutes to share with us your thoughts on the declaration. Dominic, would you like to go first, maybe? How do you view the declaration? Has it gone far enough, and is it a good basis to start the conference?
Thank you, Petros. Thank you to the European Movement International for this timely event. I'm not sure, you want now just a quick reaction to the declaration, or this is our time?
No, a quick reaction on the declaration.
Well, I think the declaration is good enough. Of course, it's not the ideal declaration. It's not the declaration that Parliament will have written on its own. But of course, we have to agree with Council. But I think on the whole is sufficient to launch the conference. I think, in my view, it's particularly good that there is no exclusion of the institutional dimension, that for a while it seemed a group of member states wanted to exclude the institutional dimension, or even to say that we couldn't discuss the drafting of a new treaty. I can say other things, but I will limit myself to this point for now.
We'll have the opportunity to elaborate further later in the conversation, but maybe I can come to you, Danuta, now to get your first reaction for a minute or two on the declaration.
Yes, thank you very much, Petros. First of all, I think it's good that we have this declaration. And I was thinking that Dominic would already know, but today the Conference of Presidents has decided this morning that we accept also as Parliament the declaration, and we will have the official launching of the ceremony of signing the joint declaration by the presidents of the three institutions during the plenary next week on Wednesday at 1 p.m. So that's, I think, good news that we have the declaration, and that looks like really we are about to launch the whole process. But I think I expected it will be like Dominic. I think I expected it to be much worse. I think it's basic things are there because there is a commitment to listen to the citizens, which I think is important, and also to follow up on the recommendations that would come out from the conference, from all the meetings that we will, which is also citizens' meetings during the conference. I think even there is a sentence dedicated to young people that I think is also a very good news on which we have to build. There is, of course, confirmation of this multilingual platform, which I personally hope it will depend also a lot on the users, if they use it really to communicate and to have ideas and not just write. It's not going to be about writing letters that maybe somebody on the other end of the process will read. So it will be also depending on how we'll implement, how we use it. I think that is also what is important for me coming from Poland is that there is democracy there in the joint declaration, there is the concern about the Union's democratic foundations and also about how to strengthen the democracy in the European Union. So I think this is also for me very important. What is for me unfortunate, I think, and unnecessary in the declaration is this just limiting, very strong statement, limiting the scope of the whole conference to the existing competence of the European Union to act or to what can be beneficial for Europe, for citizens of entire Europe. So limiting this to the action, the conference, to this type of approach, I think is not rational, I think, because we know very well that we will have to change a lot of things also in the way we function, in the way Europe is delivering. So why just shut the door at the very beginning? I don't understand it. But in principle, I think it's good to have it. It's good to start it. And let's hope that the European institutions will not continue the interinstitutional differences, but that the executive board, which will be now also, I think, established, will start working immediately and will not be focusing on the differences between the institutions, but will focus on what is uniting us, what is together, what we share, and this way we will move forward quickly and have the 9th of May really the opening of the conference. Thank you.
Great. That's really interesting, and I think there's a lot there we can unpick and come back to. But in the meantime, maybe Daniel, I can ask for your reaction on the declaration and your initial thoughts.
Well, I think, if you look at what the European Parliament has already adopted over a year ago, that was clearly more ambitious than what we have ended up with. It has been a dynamic over the past year while we have waited on the member states in the council to come to their position as well. They have mostly used this time to chop away, I guess, from the ambition that I think both the Parliament and the Commission had for the conference. I still think that pretty much everything we wanted to do is possible under this declaration. There's a lot still to be decided, right? We have now spent a year, certainly also with some delay through COVID, but also discussing, who gets to chair what exactly will be the governance structure of this. And we haven't even started the discussion on who actually, what is it that we're discussing? What are going to be the different topics of this conference? We haven't agreed yet on, beyond roughly detailing of what the different parts are. We want some citizens' participation at the European, at the local level, and so on, that there will be an online platform. We haven't really defined how the conference plenary looks like, how many MEPs will be there, how many national members of parliament, how many representatives of civil society, and so on. How do the randomly selected citizens' assemblies actually work? We in the parliament have a lot of ideas on that. Not only have we already adopted the resolution, but also in the meantime, we have written a number of working documents in the Constitutional Affairs Committee to put some more meat behind all these different ideas for the conference. So that's something that will start now, and I hope that we can break out a bit of this logic where the council just ever reduces the ambition of this conference. We all know that this is, it's not a convention. We're not quite voting on treaty change yet. We're, for a start, having an open debate with citizens about where we want to see the future. And I very much hope that now that this thing will actually kick off, that it will manage to develop a bit its own dynamic. It's the first time in 20 years that we're really discussing broader reforms. It's the first time that I really see a forum where we will have, in a larger context, national MPs, members of the European Parliament, government representatives actually discussing these things, because most of the time in the normal legislative procedure or in these workings of the EU institutions, we discuss among MEPs and the governments discuss among themselves in the council, but that the institutions actually discuss together and beyond just the rotating presidency and a few MEPs in a negotiation team and a trilogue, that is something new. And so I hope that can really develop a dynamic that brings something new to the table.
Fantastic. That's great. And I think that really gives me a great opening, perhaps to come back to you, Dominic, and check some of the issues that are really key here. First of all, it's the role of citizens. The idea behind this exercise was to create a dialogue between the European Union and its institutions and citizens following the European elections. And the second bit is, I think, what are we going to discuss and what's our ambition for the end result of that discussion? I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on those 2 points, the role of citizens and then the content, the issues we need to discuss.
Thank you very much, Petros. But before, I'd like to come back to something that Danuta said, which is important, because if you look at the declaration in page 5, that's where it says the scope of the conference should reflect the areas where the European Union has the competence to act, but also says, and this is important, going back to Danuta's preoccupation, or where European Union action will have been to the benefit of European citizens, okay? So I think it is very clear with this formulation that we are not limited at all to discuss only within the current competences of the European Union. So I'd like to make that clear from the outset. Then on the other 2 questions, the involvement of citizens, I have to admit that the declaration has also been more forthcoming than what I thought. Because even if it's a bit confusing, but there is wording that indicates that civil society organizations, like, by the way, the European Movement International, that I think should be there, fully represented, and citizens or representatives of the citizens' panels can participate in the plenary of the conference. Because there was a time, at least this is my reading, I don't know the colleagues, but my reading is that this is allowed. Whereas before, it looked like either the Council did not want citizens' panels or did not want non-institutional participants in the plenary. So I think this is also a very important achievement. In terms of the content, as I said at the beginning, as Danuta pointed out, we have also in page 5 the list of topics. We have climate change, we have social fairness, digital transformation, but we also have, and this is where the institutional dimension and the rule of law comes in, the Union's democratic foundations on how to strengthen democratic processes governing the European Union. So this is a big achievement, as I said before, because some in Council, I don't know how many, because Council is always a black box and very intransparent. We'll have to also look at that in the conference, but did not want to discuss institutions or the adaptation of the treaty. So those I think are big wins. Where we have lost mainly, and which has delayed the process too much, is on the governance. We wanted a simple, clear governance in which we had the convening power or the coordinating power of the conference. Unfortunately, Council was not available. I don't know what they fear from us. I don't know why they have this sudden love for assembly democracy and they expect almost 20 people body to self-organize itself with 3 presidents and 3 co-chairs and whatnot. But okay, probably we will make it work. So I'm not too worried, but it's a pity that they have delayed this whole thing in a way, setting out a childish and unnecessary power struggle with the Council, with Parliament regarding who chairs this board. Now, going a bit more into the detail on what we can do within this stream of the Union Democratic Foundations, because look, I don't mind discussing in the conference about climate change or about digitalization. This is the kind of thing that Council was insisting on their strategic agenda, which no one cares anymore. But for sure, those are the kind of topics that we discuss on a daily basis in the Parliament and the Council and with the Commission proposal. So for me, to be honest, I don't need another forum to discuss digitalization and climate change. They want it in, fine. But the important thing is that we have the institutions, because this is the one topic we really need to have, I think, an interinstitutional dialogue with the civil society and the citizens. And here we have to discuss how to give proper powers to the European Parliament vis-à-vis Council, with capacity to initiate legislation, to capacity to co-decide on debt and taxation, because now we have the recovery plan, but the recovery plan from a decision-making point of view is mainly an intergovernmental affair. The Parliament doesn't vote on the debt issuance, doesn't vote on the European taxes. So here we have a very important democratic dilemma, going from a fiscal and financial union to a political union that we have to tackle in the conference. Also the strengthening of the Spitzenkandidaten principle. Also the role of the European political parties that have to be stronger. So it's, I think we have a lot to discuss in the institutional dimension, and for me is the key. Of course, without prejudice of other topics. Of course, as a socialist, the policy topics comes in to the extent that we call for or we propose to incorporate them in the treaties, right? So, for example, the European Pillar of Social Rights, my belief and my group believes, and the trade unions and so many others, that has to be binding. So the best way to counterbalance the economic freedoms and the market freedoms in the treaty is to have this pillar in the social progress protocol in the treaty. Climate change, where it comes in this discussion for me, if we want to put climate neutrality in the treaty, where we don't have it right now, because at the time of the Lisbon Treaty, it was not the prominent topic that is it today. So this is more or less the agenda that I like to be developed, to see developed in the conference.
That's very interesting. That actually goes to the heart of some of the key issues here, and I echo some of your thoughts. I think it's very important. Maybe, Danuta, I can come to you, both so you can respond perhaps to some of the thoughts that DOMENEC shared, but also to tackle the same questions that are raised, the role of citizens and organized civil society, of course, in the conference, and then the issues that the conference will be discussing and what aims to deliver. Please go ahead.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say that I'm extremely happy that we finally are approaching this moment when the conference will start. But I wonder how we can get media to be back showing some interest in this conference. We have witnessed, maybe because of this delay, maybe because of other reasons, we have lost, I think, the interest of media across Europe in the conference. So this is something without which I think it will be difficult really to make the conference create this added value that we are all hoping for. So that's one thing which I would like to add to the list of DOMENEC. I also think that we are still in a moment. I mean, if we really start now on Wednesday and then on the 9th of May, and then we will go on with concrete engagements, forms of engagement and discussions. If we do it really now, that there is still a chance that we will get citizens into a debate when they still have some hope, that the hope they had about contributing to Europe, about showing that they feel responsible for Europe, about the opportunity to show that they also feel they are the owners of Europe, that this opportunity has not yet converted into a mistrust towards institutions, towards politicians that have been delaying this process. But maybe it will require some additional effort to see that we have people back with us, back on board, because I think we all know well today that whenever Europe is showing or demonstrating inability to act, this is immediately captured by all sorts of populists, and in Europe, populists are anti-European normally. So I think that this is extremely important, because only then we will be able probably to deliver on democracy, on European democracy. But I also think that I would like to add, to make it absolutely clear that the 2021, 2022, this is, in my view, because some people say it's a bad time. I think the opposite. I think also that this is just a perfect time for this joint reflection on the future for Europe. I think these are years of fundamental change in Europe, whether we want it or not, whether we will have treaty change or not. This is the time of change, of reorientation of many aspects of our life as citizens, but also changes at the national level, regional, local level. Everything that is related to this bottom-up Europe is also undergoing today huge changes. And why I'm saying this? Because I think these are the times where difficult times, the times of change, where people tend to have their own views, own opinions, stronger propensity to have the reflection, stronger propensity also to think about the future. So it is, I think, a perfect time for this reflection about the future for Europe. Also because we already have 2020 behind us, and that year, that ugly year, produced a largely unknown to us as human beings and societies, unknown experience, and there are lessons to learn. And I think one of those lessons is exactly the need to change, to have change that would make us better prepared for the future, for next shocks that will come. So this is making us also having our eyes more open, looking around, also thinking who can do what for us citizens, or with whom we can work for a better future as citizens. So this eye-opener, I think, of this crisis is also making this time for the reflection extremely good. So we have really to fully use this year and next year. We will see how long because that's another issue, how long the conference will be. And I actually agree with what DOMENEC has been saying, that because I also think that we already know what people want. We already know that climate, digital transition is important for people. We know that people want to have the economic recovery. So all those issues that we are coping with on a daily basis in the European institutions, this is something which is very important, but which is already identified as areas where people need to change, or where they would like to leave also their mark on it. So I think that we have a huge amount of issues which we share across political groups also. Maybe we see them differently, but I think across political groups, across institutions, across civil society, we have this big amount of issues that we already share, which are about our destination, so where to go. This conference is therefore important because it should tell us how to get there. And here is, I think, the major topic, because that's exactly where Europe enters. And I think this need for people to really understand and to express their views on how we should get there, where I think destination, as I said, we share. This is exactly where Europe comes in. And this is exactly where people just are open to let Europe in. And that's I think, the moment where the conference has enormous chance to do what would be difficult to do in good times. So I think that's the major value added, I think, is absolutely there. And because we see that the European solutions in those areas that were mentioned, which we can extend and then add 10 other points, but I think this should come during the conference as well. So many solutions should come with Europe, and so Europe is a vehicle now to do, indispensable, I think, to do this journey towards a better future with citizens together. So that's what this horizontal value, I would say, and expectations, I would see it this way.
That's very useful. And what I gather from both of you, Danuta and DOMENEC, is that there is a high level of ambition here, which is, I think, extremely important. We need to set our sights high. But at the same time, we need to be able to manage expectations. Danuta, you mentioned the role of citizens. And before I go to Daniel, maybe I can ask DOMENEC a little bit, because I know DOMENEC needs to leave shortly. The point that Danuta made about raising awareness around the conference and the role the media has to play, but also the role MEPs have to play. You're directly elected by citizens and you're in constant contact with your constituents and others. Also, the role of civil society organizations have to play, trusted messengers with access to a lot of people around Europe. How can we make sure that this exercise, whether it lasts 1 year or more, is firmly in the forefront of the people's minds? And of course, we are not going to be able to reach 500 million European citizens, but we need to reach as many as possible, at least make them aware that this is taking place and how they can contribute if they want. What are your thoughts, DOMENEC? How can we make sure that the profile of the conference is raised and people know about it?
Thank you, Petros. But before that, I just wanted to support what Danuta has said, in that Europe, or the European system, is the deliverer, no, of the aspirations, and the aspirations are by and large clear. I think it's a very nice way to put it, and of course, our decision-making process has to come to the forefront. For example, something that I forgot to mention before, the unanimity in the Council for some very important policy areas is something that this conference has to tackle. No doubt about it, no? Alongside, as I said before, the role of the Parliament that is still excluded, no, from some fundamental decisions. Now, on your question, I think we have to be more invested. We have to up our game in terms of marketing and communication. I think this has not been traditionally the strong point of the Commission in particular, maybe also of the institutions in general. There has been a traditional fear of looking like we were making propaganda. This goes back to the 70s. But you see that the enemies of Europe have no qualms in using disinformation and propaganda. I'm not going to say that we have to do the same, but certainly in our communication, we don't have, or we should not have any complexes or any reservations. We have to up our game for sure, because that's the way to raise awareness. Now, if I may, on the concrete participation, I think the role of the organized civil society is very important, because, as you said, we are not going to be able to gather millions of people in a venue or in different venues. We can, yes, hold many events at the local, regional, and state level, and hopefully we can reach to a big critical mass, but not directly to the 500 million people. But the organized civil society is it's very important in the sense that we have several organizations that I think can bring things to the table. They have expertise. They are intermediate bodies that socialize policies between the citizen and the institutions. So for me, and I have fought for that a lot in the context of the Parliament resolutions, that we have to guarantee a strong role for the organized civil society in the conference.
Excellent. That is, of course, music to my ears, and clearly I agree. And I believe that we need to ensure that, as I said earlier, that the people who have the closest contact with citizens, like MEPs, like organized civil society, function as a channel to also bring in the views of citizens. It's really important to engage citizens directly through digital platforms, by randomly chosen panels. The options at our disposal are quite extensive, but I think we can take advantage of civil society too. As I said, I'm conscious that Daniel and Danuta need to go, Dominic and Danuta need to go, and Daniel has been very patient in waiting for his turn. So maybe I can thank the two of you before you sign off. And while you do that, I'll come to you, Daniel, and I'll ask for your thoughts, both on what you've heard from your colleagues so far, but also on the key points here, the content, the role of citizens, outreach, and communications.
Well, I think if we want citizens to notice that this process is taking place, it has to be a serious process. Why should any citizen engage with this conference if it doesn't lead to any outcome? Whereas, on the other hand, if it's clear that this is the discussion on the major reform that will take place on the European Union in maybe the next decade, 2 decades, what do I know, to come, then naturally people will engage, will listen, will insert their ideas into the process. So I think that is the key determination. Afterwards, we can talk about our media strategy and more means for communication and whatnot. But first of all, we have to assure that the structure, that the process is good and that this is a meaningful conference, and then I think the rest will basically sort itself out more or less along. Second question on the topics. I'm not sure I fully agree with DOMENEC here. I think on the ambition, yes, ultimately we do need some institutional reforms, but if we now go to citizens and say, hey, we want to discuss the future of Europe, so tell me, what do you think about transnational lists? How many people should we elect on those? Or or tell me how exactly the right of initiative of the parliament should be written into the treaty. I'm not sure that citizens understand this as some of the major issues that the union is facing today. But if you develop the institutional questions through topics, through concrete problems that they are facing, then I think we can get broad support. To give you just one example, I think if you ask citizens, would you think that large corporations doing business in Europe should pay their fair share of taxes, you will struggle to find a lot of citizens that disagree with that statement. And then if you look into why is it that large corporations do not pay their taxes, well, one of the reasons is that tax policy is still done by member states. It requires unanimity, and that there is a small number of member states that are basically undercutting everyone else's taxes, so that we all as Europeans are worse off in this situation. And I think if you have that debate and then draw the necessary conclusions from that, well, then you get to the kind of institutional reforms that we're looking for. A right for initiative for the European Parliament, the abolishment of unanimity voting in the Council, those kind of things. And I think when we're talking elections, when we're talking transnational lists, Spitzenkandidaten system as well, I would approach it through a debate on how should European democracy actually work? How can that further be improved? How can we increase citizen participation in EU decision-making? I think that's something that citizens will be delighted to engage in. And I think really that these randomly selected citizens' assemblies at the European level should be the core of all of this. Every time I hear, we want to have all these debates all across the union, it's sort of, yes, let's do those as well. But we need European debates. It doesn't really help if we hold the small local discussion in my hometown of Aachen, where Aacheners discuss what they see at the future. If that is something different than what people in Spain, in Finland, in Cyprus would discuss, we're not getting together, right? So we need truly European debates to deliver European solutions, because that's precisely what I see as missing from the game. Last point I want to make. Since we always run into trouble in Europe in those cases where sort of integration is stuck halfway. We have seen it with migration, we've seen it with the Euro crisis, we're seeing it right now with vaccinations and the pandemic. So why aren't we able to do those reforms? It's usually because a few member states are blocking us with that, right? So the whole exercise of this conference for me is to garner enough public pressure to overcome these blockages among a number of member states, because on many of these reforms we have huge majorities in the European Parliament, right? Basically from the communists to the conservatives, everyone agrees that the European Parliament should have the right of initiative, that we should abolish unanimity voting in the Council, that we need more climate change, better digitization, that we need a distribution system for asylum seekers and migrants. All of these things have broad majorities, but it is individual member states in the Council that are blocking these European solutions. So I hope that the conference can deliver enough public pressure that at least some of these obstacles can be overcome.
Yeah, that is indeed crucial, and perhaps, if I may, I think the key question here is also around the architecture of the EU. DOMENEC earlier mentioned that we need to touch upon things that might be taboo, like the national veto, and certainly consider the overall architecture of the EU decision-making, because, like you said, this is a unique opportunity to encourage citizens to engage a bit more with decision-making. But if they come up to the well and they find it dry of water, they will walk away. Then, by engaging them, we need to also show them that their views count and their ideas can be part of the future of Europe. So I guess, how ambitious can we be when it comes to things like that, structural changes and even treaty change, perhaps?
Well, I mean, let's say the dilemma that I find myself in at the moment is I want to be ambitious, right? I want deep reform. If you look at our Green Election Program, there's quite some bold ideas. We want a European Federal Republic. So quite some ambitious reforms. I know that if we now engage with this process, we promise all these treaty reforms and bold reform agenda, and then nothing comes of it, we actually risk alienating citizens even more than they already might be. So there's that risk that nothing comes of it. But if we do not try, and if we don't fight for this reform agenda, then we're already sure from the outset that we're not getting anything. So that's a bit, I feel the dilemma that we're in. But the Parliament has been very united, as I said, from the GUE to the EPP. We have all supported the positions in the Parliament that we want treaty change, that we want this type of citizen consultation, that we want a really open and broad debate on reforms. So as I said, I hope that once we do get going now, that we do get the MPs and the government representatives as well in the room, that this will develop a dynamic. I mean, just the fact by having MPs and MEPs and government representatives sitting in a plenary according to their political groups is something that hasn't really happened, and that I hope will change the mindset of people, and will deliver experiences that people haven't really made in a long time, or maybe not ever.
Indeed. I should say that there is a lot of interest in this, and that's quite encouraging. Obviously, a lot of our followers and our members around Europe will already know about the Conference on the Future of Europe, but looking at the reaction we are getting through social media and elsewhere where the discussion is being broadcast, the comments that are coming in are plentiful. And maybe I can pick up on a couple. Maria from Spain, for example, wanted to ask a little bit about security and defense. To what degree these kind of policy areas might be discussed. Areas where, as it was said earlier by all of you, the EU might not have a lot of competence. Is this an opportunity to really delve into policy areas that the member states have really guarded zealously over the last few decades?
Well, the next few weeks, I think, will tell. Today, we agreed that we are creating this executive board, and I think once this executive board will start meeting, that's exactly when that question of what is it actually that we're going to discuss in this conference will be decided. Again, the ambition of the council so far has been limited. As DANUTA said, the biggest limiting factor is maybe the time frame. If we are only giving ourselves barely 12 months minus a summer break and whatnot, we won't be able to discuss everything. And I'm quite conscious that what will be extremely important for this conference is that it delivers something tangible at the end. So I'd rather discuss less topics, but have some concrete outcomes on something, so that we can show, well, first of all, that the EU can be reformed, right? That it's not a lost cause to discuss EU reform, but also then that this new way of doing things, randomly selected citizens, and this conference model as a whole is a success. Because I very much think that if in this next year, even just on one topic area, be that how European elections work, or for me, well, why not discuss defense and foreign policy maybe? But it needs to deliver something concrete, because I'm convinced that if it manages to do that, we will repeat the exercise, or we will keep going and say, well, now we use the same way of doing things for the next problem that we're facing. Whereas on the other hand, if we fail and if nothing comes of it, well, we won't do this again. We all remember what happened with the Constitutional Treaty and then the Treaty of Lisbon. For the last 10 years, just mentioning the idea of changing the EU treaties got you rolling eyes in any conversation, and people think that you're slightly insane, right? And that we won't ever do that again. So it is vitally important that that this delivers something concrete. And again, as I said before, for the citizens, that's the core of it as well. We have done these citizens dialogues. The Commission proudly says every time that they have, over the last 2 years, talked to, or the last 3 years, talked to 200,000 citizens, that most of the heads of state and government have done these town hall meetings and whatnot. And what has this led to? Well, at the end, there was a 90-second discussion at the European Council. If that is the outcome of this exercise, well, I can understand if people then say, I'm done with that. I'm not engaging with the EU anymore, because this isn't leading to anything.
Yeah. Indeed, the risk of causing disappointment and perhaps even telling people off the European product. In that regard, some of the questions that are raised here on social media are around the role of civil society. And how can we make sure that, on the one hand, we create a space for citizens to come and engage with the conference, and on the other hand, we operate as a channel to funnel the thoughts and the ideas and the aspirations, but even the anxieties of European citizens into the executive board or the plenary of the conference, so our elected representatives are aware of them and can act on them. So one or two concrete suggestions of how can we help?
Well, I mean, I'm coming from civil society myself. I was with Transparency International for the 5 years before joining the parliament. I'm very conscious about the role that civil society can and should play. And since the beginning, when we started thinking about how this conference should work, I have been fighting for a strong role of civil society in all aspects of this conference. I think it's absolutely crucial. We all have to do our parts. Governments have to do their parts. The local municipalities, cities have to do their parts. Civil society definitely as well. And I think concretely, what you can do is, well, develop your ideas of what should the future of Europe look like. What are your reform proposals that you want to see? Put those forward. Say, we have this much support. So many organizations, so many citizens support our call for, whatever it is that you want to put forward, and fight for getting. If the conference works well, this is the space for ideas that haven't happened yet, that maybe have failed once before in the normal legislative process, that have been bogged down maybe for years somewhere in the machine of the EU. This might be the moment to get them unstuck, to move them forward. And so all I can say, this is a huge opportunity for change. So take it and fight for the issues that you as civil society want to see, whether that's better protection of fundamental rights, whether it's more ambitious climate change, whatever it is. I would see that this is an opportunity for you to get your issues, to get them to the next step. And I think that is then also the best thing you can do for the process itself, to engage with the process and make the debate as lively as can be.
No, that's good to hear. And civil society, I think, appreciates very much having champions like yourself, but also the other guests we had earlier in the European Parliament, calling for the inclusion of citizens and civil society in the discussion. We've kept you quite a bit, so I'll just reserve the right for one last question before we let you go back to your work, which probably includes preparation for the conference itself. And that is a little bit of a perspective, because the EU at the moment is in a challenging period in its history. We just had the departure of the UK, we are fighting a pandemic, there are global challenges, not least the climate crisis, but also the rise of powers beyond our shores. And David from Scotland actually is asking, how can the EU come out of this difficult process, using the difficult time, using the conference as an opportunity to really reassert itself at the European stage? Basically, how can Europe say, we are here for you, citizens? It's a difficult juncture in our history, but we can deliver.
Well, I think it's precisely in those times when there is crisis, as you said, when there is for the first time a member state leaving, and not a small one, that I think we need to have that reflection process, that we need to have the courage to have an open and honest debate with our citizens about the future. I think that is precisely the right answer to the current situation. I don't think it's all gloomy. I think the response that the EU has found to the economic crisis following Corona, that we have adopted the recovery package just before Christmas, that for the first time we as the European Union are going to indebt ourselves together to invest together in a sustainable and digital future, I think is very promising. Who would have thought a year ago that we would make that big leap forward in integration? Because I think that's what this is. I think there are some promising signs as well. So I hope that the conference, and the successful conference, can be another step in forward in the right direction. Because ultimately, I mean, we live in a time where there is many continental, if not global, challenges, and it's ultimately the question of, do we answer those challenges together, or do we perish alone and with our tiny member states that we all come from, because they won't be able to answer questions like taxation of multinational companies, like climate change, like what should Europe's role in the world be, and how do we defend our common values and rights. So for me, the only answer is that we do that together, and I hope that the conference can, if I doubt it will solve our issues. I doubt that in one go now, in a couple of years, we will finalize that long road that we Europeans have been on from the early days of integration to where we're now, and that all of a sudden now we jump to a fully integrated federal union. I don't think it will happen quite like that. But if we take at least the next bold step, I think that's the hope that I have for this conference and for the next couple of years. So I think that's something very much worth fighting for.
Perfect. This is a great note to finish our conversation. Daniel, you have been very generous both for your time, but also quite enlightening with your thoughts. And thank you very much. As far as all of you watching, I encourage you to remain engaged in this. The conference, as you heard, is an opportunity for us as citizens to be part of the decisions that affect us. Depending on where you're watching this broadcast, you can find the proposals of the European movement either at europeanmovement.eu or on Twitter, Facebook, and other social media where you might be watching this. Take a look at what we're proposing and engage with us, and through us, engage with the conference. We're looking forward to working with you on this and many other subjects. A big welcome and thank you very much to all of you from me here in Brussels. Have a good afternoon.